Hi, Ed Begley here again with another episode of EMA Talks. And I'm excited to have a chance to talk to another incredible leader in science, this time in the science of innovation. As a brief recap, EMA Talks is a long-form conversation program at the cross-section of arts and science, focusing on all issues climate-centric, brought to you by the Environmental Media Association, an organization I've been a board member of for 30 years. Now, back to our regular program show, which is myself speaking on the subject of clean modes of transportation, something many of you know I've been obsessed with since I was riding a bike around the valley in the 1970s. I also bought an electric car back then. Today, we don't need to pedal too hard to be energy efficient, but with so many alternative energy vehicles on the road, what is what? There's electric, there's hybrid/electric, and then there's fuel cell, which sounds funny, but it's no laughing matter. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to be joined this afternoon by the General Manager of Fuel Cell Business Development, who's involved in infrastructure strategy and partnership, Mr. Douglas Moore, who's a fellow energy geek. He's here to talk to us about all things that are, no pun intended, in motion for the future of energy efficient cars at Toyota. Douglas, welcome. First question, what did you do at Toyota and how did you join the company?
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate it and good to be here. So what do I do for Toyota? Currently, as you suggested, my title is General Manager for Fuel Cell Solutions and in Business Development. I have the pleasure and the fortune to work in a space where we get to think about things in Toyota that are non-core business. So what does the future look like? How do we actually sort of think about implementing that future, realizing it on a day-to-day basis and making sure that we can align it with who we are and what we can actually do as Toyota. How did I get here? I think that's an interesting question. I think part of it is just really sort of having an intimate desire for wanting to sort of see that future and then just sharing that passion as I've worked my way within Toyota to say, hey, let's get to where we need to be. So.
Now, I'm told you had an aha moment at Toyota. I've had my share of aha moments myself. Can you tell me about yours?
Yeah, I don't know if I've just had one aha moment. I probably had multiple, right? The key
Me too.
aha moment, yeah, I know. One of the most pressing aha moments in my history is actually when I first joined Toyota. So at the time, I was working for a robotics startup company in the Bay Area and sort of looking at sort of what was the next opportunity for me, and happened to come across a posting at Toyota that was involved in robotics. So I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And I applied. And actually, when I went to interview, not only did I realize that the company and the culture of what was at Toyota was something different that you wouldn't expect, right? I met people that had been there for 20, 30 years and sort of still excited, motivated, and enthralled with what they were doing at Toyota. But also at the same time, realized that what Toyota does was not just make vehicles, right? The group that I got to interview with was called the Partner Robot Group. And so they didn't do anything related to automotive. They did home and healthcare applications. And, ever since then, every time I've always introduced myself that I work at Toyota, most people either tell me about their Toyota, say, oh, can you help me solve this problem on my Camry or something? Or they'll ask what I do on the vehicle. And I have to often tell them I don't do anything on the vehicles. And this was when I was in the Partner Robot Group, focused on a wide variety of different things. And that was my aha moment of saying, man, Toyota is so much more than just making cars. And the culture of what Toyota is, there's the Toyota way of respect for people and continuous improvement that was focused on saying, hey, let's make great cars. Even though we want to do that, it was really thinking about a holistic sort of picture of society. Like, how do we actually respect people and always makes things better? And so for me, that was a huge aha to say that there's an opportunity for me to take skills that I have and apply it in a space that maybe I wouldn't have expected before in the past.
Now, to achieve a carbon neutral society, something that we all hope happens sooner rather than later, we're going to need a wide range of technologies. Can you explain the options of alternative fuel vehicles and how hydrogen fuel cells can help us reach carbon neutrality?
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you that we need a range. And, this is one of the consistent messages that, we as Toyota believe in and having a lot of the solutions that are out there. So as you said in the intro, there's a lot of different solutions that are out there. So there's the standard vehicle, which is the ICE vehicle, which is ICE, and so it stands for internal combustion engine. This is the traditional vehicle that everybody knows about, and it's something that we're moving away from as we go into the future. There's the hybrid vehicle, which the hybrid has various forms, right? There's the plug-in hybrid, there's the battery electric vehicle, there's the standard hybrid. Hybrid obviously is a mix, right? You have a mixture of the ICE engine, so the standard gas engine that's there, and some sort of electric powertrain that's in there that sort of balances between the two. When you think about just a standard hybrid, the hybrid itself will use that gas engine when it's necessary and be able to sort of transition to the hybrid portion when it's appropriate, whether at a stop or coming to a stop or starting. The plug-in hybrid is when you actually get to have a little bit more of the battery in the vehicle. So when you're at home, you can actually plug it in. You'll get a certain amount of range depending on how much battery is in that plug-in hybrid, where you'll be able to just run solely off of the battery electric until the standard gas engine comes into play and you actually can get that. And then there's the future of BEVs, so the battery electric vehicles, where you take that ICE engine out and you're just running solely on the battery. And then, as you suggested, there's the fuel cell. So the fuel cell is kind of sort of the mixture of the hybrid as we go forward. But instead of having a gas engine, the fuel cell, which runs off of hydrogen, is creating the energy. And so that fuel cell vehicle will take hydrogen, convert it to energy. So hydrogen and oxygen combine to make energy. That energy flows to your electric powertrain, and that's what actually helps drive you forward. In fuel cell vehicles, there is a small battery that's in there as well. You can almost imagine that as a little bit of a buffer zone to keep the car going and moving when you have a strong surge of energy needs or requirements for the platform.
Now, do you think hydrogen fuel cell technology is scalable across the transportation sectors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we think about sort of existing powertrains and how they can be scalable, there's no reason that the fuel cell technology can't be scalable. So when we think about what supplies the fuel cell is hydrogen, it's super abundant. Obviously, we have water all over Earth. So you take water and you make hydrogen. So from a fuel resource, absolutely. And the fact that it's completely renewable, right? When you use the hydrogen to actually make the energy, you recombine it back into water. So the source, definitely there. And then when you think about the scalability of the technology, internally to a fuel cell, you have a membrane that's actually creating sort of the energy by the interchange of the hydrogen and oxygen. But then you use that membrane to create a fuel cell stack. So this is almost like a motor. And then as you're feeding that fuel cell stack with the hydrogen, you can actually then scale those stacks to create more and more energy, right? It's just, they work in parallel with each other and just make it work seamlessly. So as you start to think about using those stacks in different locations, it could be for stationary energy, it could be for larger trucks and platforms, it could be for rail applications, it could be for marine applications. Not only is it scalable, but it's also diverse in its use and sort of benefit to both the environment and the mobility sector.
What are the challenges that you see in getting the infrastructure, the fueling infrastructure available for consumers where they need it?
Yeah, that's been a big challenge for us. Ed, have you ever driven a fuel cell vehicle? Have you had the pleasure?
I have. I've driven the Mirai, and it's a beautiful car.
Yeah, did you? So where did you drive it?
I just drove it a short distance. I didn't drive it, up to Santa Barbara or anything like that. So I just drove it around a few blocks to experience, operating the vehicle, but I haven't, driven it for any period of time.
Yeah. So you didn't get the pleasure of possibly having to fuel it on a regular basis. But when we think about infrastructure, it's one of those questions that you don't ask until you have to ask it, right? So when you're in a fuel cell vehicle and you start to see the fuel gauge go down to E, that's when your brain starts thinking, okay, I need to start filling this up. So one of the first questions and the first challenges we have in infrastructure is, where do I go, right? So knowing where the hydrogen stations are and where they are out there in the world. So there's solutions for that. There's apps. There's a website in California that allows you to sort of see where those stations are, where the future stations are planned to be, and also sort of the status of the stations. So first challenge is, where's the station? Second challenge is, does the station have fuel, right? So because this is a new industry and we're thinking about how to properly make sure that the customer has what they need all the time, Toyota has been supporting other infrastructure partners to say, let's generate these and get these stations out there. So part of that support could be through the customer experience. Part of that support could be through helping them to understand where are good locations for this. Part of that could be just understanding how to properly sort of set up a station, especially if there's new and emerging types of startup companies that are out there trying to get this. So in the infrastructure, we wanted it to grow quickly, right? So as we've certainly put the Mirai out there, and as you said, you drove those. So we're on the second generation Mirai. I'm not sure if you drove the first or the second, but the second, they're both fantastic. The second one was great. I got a chance to drive it.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah, the additional, so people have been buying the Mirai and they love the vehicle, but as more and more of these vehicles get out there, obviously you're putting more and more demand on these stations. In our current history here with COVID and some of the things around it, that's caused some additional stress in the infrastructure. How do we get the proper drivers to deliver some of these things? Because driver resource hasn't always been number one. How do we make sure we have the right allocation of some of the hydrogen? Some of that hydrogen has gone to hospitals not just the hydrogen, but the drivers have been dedicated in sort of delivering things like oxygen. So you have this resource issue where you're trying to get it there. Some of it's just making sure we get the permitting right. And so this is a new deal. Obviously people have questions around safety and security of hydrogen stations and making sure those are done, and just getting people comfortable with a new sort of environment, a new way of doing stuff. The other side of the equation of the benefit with infrastructure is once it's in place and you have new customers. So right now, about 96% of vehicles are still ICE vehicles. If we take out the battery electric vehicles and other things. So as we want to start transitioning, the rest of the driving universe to cleaner, better alternatives, to use a fuel cell vehicle is very easy. It's the same way you would do a standard ICE vehicle. You drive to a station, you would put the hose on and it fills up in five minutes. So the transition for someone to say, why is this different? How do I do it is limited when we have enough stations and availability to get out there and make sure that the burden on the user isn't so great that they have to go and search for these stations and make sure they're open.
Yeah, when I drove a natural gas car for a while back in the 90s, I would always be searching for those fueling stations, and sometimes they'd be closed without notice and what have you. It could be a challenge, but they would pump a tank up, and I gave up some trunk space so I'd have extra range from the tank that the car came with. It was a Ford Contour flex fuel, so if I got in a bind, I could run it on gasoline, but I was stubborn and didn't want to. But it would fill it up to 3,000 psi. What PSI did bring the tank up to? I'm just curious for a fill in that car.
Yeah, so I think it's 10,000 psi is where we're running.
Wow.
There's two different versions. There was the 35 megapascal and 70 megapascal is what you'll see at stations, right? So you'll see a 35 or a 70. And it is because of this incredibly high pressure that, the stations also have to do a really good job of making sure they're operating, right? So as you put this pressure into the vehicle, then you need to make sure that you have the systems and safety put in place to make sure it's getting there. So that's on both sides of the equation. So the Toyota vehicle itself is important for it to make sure it's receiving the hydrogen in it and making sure it's safe, and also the station itself is there. So PSI is the pressure that goes into the vehicle. So pounds per square inch, that's in there, right? So and it's unlike gasoline or a liquid fuel where you sort of pour from, imagine if you had two cups, right? If you poured from one into the other, you'd have liquid just pouring in and you don't have to worry about it. This is almost like connecting two balloons. Yeah. And if you want to fill one balloon all the way, you have to squeeze the other balloon to get the pressure, right? So that's what we're doing with the hydrogen, right? We're not pouring liquid into the car. We are actually squeezing the gas into the vehicle. So that's when we have to think about making sure we got the right pressure there.
And did I hear you right, Doug? Did you say it's about a 5-minute top off to get it from relatively empty to relatively full?
That's right. So
that's not bad at all. Now, is it quiet like an electric car, or what's the sound like on it?
Yeah, just like, yeah, I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences in electric vehicles. So yeah, it's incredibly quiet. And when you put it on, you wouldn't even know that it was on, aside from the fact that all the digital display comes out. One of the fun things, and I don't know if you got to do this on the Mirai that you drove, is in the Mirai, there's a little button that allows you to sort of squirt out the water when it's done. So when you're at a good spot. So of course, again, hydrogen and oxygen come back together. The byproduct is water. So you get to actually sort of eject the water when you have the right moment to make that happen. So, but outside of that, yes, it's just like any other electric vehicle, super quiet. And, with the modern technology with these powertrains, it's just as quick, if not quicker, than a lot of other vehicles out there on the road.
Now, air pollution is a substantial public health issue, of course. It doesn't affect everybody equally. Can you explain Toyota's Project Portal and how it promotes environmental justice and equity?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. Obviously this drives back to the carbon neutral society that you talked about earlier. So the Project Portal is a project that we've been working in the Port of LA, where we're trying to help convert the trucking fleet there to fuel cell platforms, right? So when you think about the amount of traffic that happens in that space with trucks, right? So the fact that they're picking things up at the port and taking them out there, this is where you get a lot of that traffic coming through. And most of those trucks, being diesel, have a lot of emissions that go out into that space. Now, the corridor that they run through there, obviously with sort of the location and some of the opportunity there, is that lower community that has a more direct impact from those things, from those trucks that are commuting back and forth there. So by influencing this space, by putting fuel cell heavy duty trucks as part of this solution, you're kind of killing multiple birds with one stone here. One, you are making a big impact on the environment. This is one of the largest contributors to some of this carbon issues that we're having. Two, you make a huge impact on this community that's surrounded by these platforms. And three, you're actually getting a lot of different traffic sort of seeing the benefit and the capability of the fuel cell trucks in this space. So, we think it's a huge opportunity, not just to sort of show the potential of fuel cell vehicles, but also a huge opportunity for the community around there to realize the benefits. And we're also helping in other areas too. Toyota has a very big heart for making sure underserved communities have those opportunities. There's an opportunity for us to donate some Mirais in Central California and get some of those vehicles out to a lower income community. And by doing so, it not only raises awareness of what we have as a platform, but also does make a huge impact on some of their lives and sort of how they actually see opportunity and the ability to move from their space.
Now, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Most people don't understand it. What are some sources of hydrogen that will be pumped into your vehicles?
Yeah, so as mentioned, obviously hydrogen comes from water, right? So, and there's different ways to convert that water into hydrogen, right? So there's three simple methods. There's three ways of describing how hydrogen is being made these days. So there's gray hydrogen, which uses traditional sort of coal refinement to actually get it there. There's blue hydrogen, which is using sort of steam methane reforming, where you're reforming this, but you're trying to capture some of the output from that steam. And then there's green hydrogen. And green hydrogen is when you're using renewables like solar, wind, biogas, and some of the other things to actually make your hydrogen. Our goal is to have our hydrogen coming from green sources that are making not only no negative impact, but actually having a positive impact on the environment by using those things. As we transition from where we are today, from the gray-blue area to the green area, we hope that the efficiency and the ability for us to make hydrogen out of those green solutions continues to improve, right? That's where we need to sort of pour into technology, investments, and understanding how to continue to improve that efficiency. So the consumer, not only are they impacting the environment in a good way, but they're also realizing, lower cost of ownership for their mobility solutions, right? And so how do we actually sort of have a win-win for both environment and our customers?
I happen to know Toyota's been researching fuel cell technology since '92. What is Toyota's future vision for the technology? Why is it important to remain focused on it when there's also this battery powered option?
Yeah, another great question. I think as we discussed earlier, Toyota believes in sort of a complement, a whole suite of solutions that help provide the consumer both with choice and also with impact, right? So BEVs, the battery electric vehicles, are also part of our solution, and we are super excited about the BEV lineup that we have coming out. But you got to think about where's the proper use of the proper platform, right? So if one size cell phone was sufficient for everybody, you'd only see one size cell phone sitting in the store shelves, but everybody's using it differently. Where you see the trade-off of the benefit of fuel cell versus a BEV is when you start to get to a larger platform, right? So as you go up in vehicle size, so let's go from the small little vehicle, let's say Toyota Corolla size, BEV likely will get most of the stuff done there. You can do your daily commuting, your short range trips. Even if you start to do a longer trip, the amount of energy that has to go into the platform to recharge it might be something that the consumer is willing to accept. When you start to get to larger platforms, when you start to get like SUV size or something like that, you start to sort of realize the benefit of what a fuel cell platform is. You don't have to have all the additional weight of the battery on the platform, so you're not dragging that around all the time. You have the benefit of refueling rather quickly. So again, 5 minutes on a standard vehicle. So it's no different than your trip to the gas station today. And then, you start to see even more benefit when you go beyond that, right? When light duty vehicles, commercial vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, where if you imagine how much, batteries a semi needs to sort of drag around to get the range and the efficiency you need, you're still dragging around a lot of extra weight. So, we believe in that ecosystem where there's a right solution for the right sort of customer, depending on their needs, right? If you are driving even in a smaller vehicle consistently all day, maybe your work is constantly driving your vehicle, you may think a fuel cell is a better solution because of the convenience of refueling and the less downtime that you have. So that's where we think about that complement of solutions. Where does the technology go? I think we continue to make our fuel cells more efficient. So how are we actually getting more power out of it? How do we make them smaller and lighter so that they can be used in more applications? So rather than just the vehicle, where else can we actually put these platforms? And even actually going up, as we start to put more of these fuel cell solutions together, how do we actually start to replace a lot of traditional things? Stationary energy is one of those things where you have a lot of historic diesel type backup generators that are not very clean, right? So can we use those type of solutions where it's a fuel cell as a backup generator to actually be a better solution for our customers and for the environment?
Now, somebody told me that your family a good many of them are firefighters, and you're in the business of saving the world with technology. Tell me what your family dinners are like.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting question. It is true. So, my dad's a firefighter. He's retired, and my older brother is a firefighter, and my younger brother is a firefighter. And I actually thought about being a firefighter myself, but I felt like, I had this opportunity as an engineer to really do something and make a difference. And that was also part of my aha moment at Toyota, right? When I first joined, I got an opportunity to work on a project where we were doing both intelligent manipulation. So I was applying my brain-based AI background to robotics and how do you actually sort of do things in the world. And the second project was, let's make a robot for the blind and visually impaired. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And then we have a thing in Toyota, it's called Genshiken Butsu. So if you translate that, it's kind of like actual place, actual thing. So I got a chance. I grew up in the Bay Area. So I was working at the Bay Area by San Francisco this time to go sit with a group in Berkeley, which was called Lighthouse Labs. And so there's a group called Lighthouse for the Blind, which is in San Francisco, but they had a little group called the Labs group, which they got together, and it was a bunch of blind people that got together and say, let's talk about technology that's being applied in this space. And so getting involved in that was one of the things that really helped me change my perspective, that aha moment of being able to say, how do I, as an engineer, sort of impact people's lives, and where's my purpose and passion in life. So I was able to say, man, I can take my ability to do technology, take some needs of individuals where it's not even that far reaching, right? And just put them together to say, how do we make a difference in their life, right? So when we talk about our family dinners, are fun because we get together. But I really attribute my dad. He's always the creative one. He's always telling me about ideas he wants to patent. So he just called me like a few days ago, told me about a new one. But I take his creativity and then a combined interest of saying, hey, let's make a difference for people in the world, and just say, okay, let's just keep applying that, right? Doesn't mean everything's going to work. And it sounds like you've been in this world for quite some time of understanding technology as it comes and goes and having to push, right? You know what this is like. It's not easy, but
for the long haul.
That's right. But if it's mirroring your passion and what you get to do on a day-to-day basis, and you get to see in person how it changes people, I think that's the part that really makes it different, right? And that's what takes me back to the original thing with Toyota. It's about that respect for people that I just wouldn't have expected from the outside, right? It's about sort of being able to sort of know what that culture is like and sort of be able to make a difference.
Well, you're doing it very well, Doug, and we're so happy to have you on. And I'm going to ask my help here, Asher and Debbie and what have you. Are we taking any questions or anything like that? Or tell me where we're at right now. Are there any?
I think we're great.
If you have anything, Ed, that you wanted to ask him, feel free to do that. But I think this went great.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Let me say one last thing, if I may, and certainly if Doug wants
Sure.
to say something, he can have the last word.
Oh, go ahead.
Doug, I found that if we do everything that we can, each and every one of us, everything that people can afford, a lot of people can't afford, like I have a fancy electric car and I got 9 kilowatts of solar. That's like the top of the mountain. That's Mount Everest. Not everybody gets to the top, but if you get to base camp and get acclimated and you do what you can, get the energy efficient light bulbs, energy saving thermostat, weather stripping around the doors and windows. And if you're going to buy a car, get a good car that has good mileage, or perhaps even one of these greener technologies. It's an interesting list people often give me of things they can't do, that they cannot do. But the more interesting list for me is things that people can do. And you have a lot of great choices over the years. I've driven a lot of Toyota cars, green cars I'm talking about. They've been wonderful vehicles that have lasted a long time. So thanks for doing what you do there at Toyota, and keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. I agree. And, I think not only is it what you can do, think about what's your role in contributing, where it makes a difference, right? So, I'll apply that to Toyota in my space. Probably the first thing that comes to mind when anybody thinks of Toyota is quality, safety, and reliability. So as we think about transition into sort of this new mobility space, what does the future of mobility look like? Toyota gets to do that, right? We get to take our lens of how do we make a real quality vehicle in something that's totally new. And we're applying all of our expertise of how we know to do stuff, right? And then think about, let's get the customers involved. Let's make sure the customer is engaged in our platforms. So as we create solutions, I would encourage people to at least check it out, give it a try, and sort of think about how that can be part of your future, and look at the whole suite of solutions that we have. This is not about, me trying to say, go buy a Toyota, but this is about what we can solve together. And whether it's, here or elsewhere, you can make a difference. And I think the fuel cell solution is going to be one of those ones that really changes the world. It's going to take some time. I'm not ignorant to the challenge in front of us. But when we get something that's truly renewable, man, what an awesome solution, especially when it helps to move the world.
Well, good luck with it, Doug. And thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you again soon at the next EMA Awards and elsewhere.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ed. It was a pleasure. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks.